Okay, let's begin. I am Denise Antoine Shelley, and I'll be your host through constructive, healing-based conversations designed to illuminate the adoptee, parents, and the adoption curious. We center the topics around community, mentorship, leadership, and healing, so you get a multi-dimensional view that is ultimately empowering. These are the voices who could not speak when they were young. Hey y'all, if you've seen me on Instagram, I'm in my summer glow phase and I am unapologetic about it. My hair is luscious. Fun fact, I didn't start properly treating and doing my own hair until I was a grown adult because like many Black adoptees, no one showed me how to do my own hair. And because I love you all so much, I'm going to share with you my hair secret. I'm always on the lookout for things you'd love and things that will enhance your well-being inside and out. We Unique Cosmetics sent me their Moisture Lock pomade and scalp and hair therapy oil from their Metamorphosis line, and it's so decadent, light, and nourishing, fam. This has become a hair routine staple. It has a soft lemongrass scent that people comment on when I walk by or when they're doing my hair because now I have boho locks. They also sent me a 15% discount link for you to try their products and hair tutorial service. And Unique Cosmetics is Black owned and operated by a mother and daughter duo dedicated to helping the adoptee community. Check out the link in the show notes. And this is for all ages, fam. So tell your friends. So come on, embark on a hair-loving journey with We Unique World. From interactive workshops to premium products, they're all about empowering you to embrace your unique hair journey. Because remember, all hair is good hair, especially when it's healthy. These are some of our most popular and important conversations on this podcast. We are modeling how to have a conversation about adoption with a loved one, with an adoptive loved one. You'd think it was easy, but let me tell you, I have friends and I know a lot of people who've never talked to their husbands or other family members about adoption or had a meaningful conversation with their parents about adoption. Again, I'm not saying that you need to talk about adoption all the time or ever talk about it, but I am simply examining why aren't we talking about it? Is it because of fear? Is it because of guilt or uncomfortability? Is it because we do not want to hurt someone else's feelings? I don't talk about adoption with my family all the time. However, when I do, there is an ease. I am not triggered. I do not have heart palpitations. I do not plummet into not enoughness or indebtedness, nor does my mom, my adoptive mom, make me feel guilty about my inquiries because she accepts that it is part of my journey to wholeness and clarity, which we all are entitled to. As Marianne Williamson would say, are we motivated by love or motivated by fear? And since we all know that this podcast is about inspired motivation, let us move towards wholeness in relationships of inspiration rather than deprivation. I got that from relationship psychologist Ken Page. All right, let's get to it. Today we have Jamie-Lyn Richartz, who was on our panel series last summer. She sits down with her adoptive mother, Denise. With each adoptee and adoptive family interview, I give them core questions beforehand. Then they create their own organic conversation within that structure. I'm not there at all. This conversation is so deeply authentic, wholehearted, intimate, and heartwarming. It really made me feel that there is hope for us all. They are both such sweet humans learning and growing together. I love it. Here is Jamie-Lyn Richartz and her adoptive mother, Denise.
So hi, Mom. It's just us.
Hey, how are you, honey?
I'm good. How are you?
Good.
You comfortable?
Yes, I am comfortable.
Okay, good. Can you hear me okay with the headphones on?
I can hear you okay, yes.
Okay, great. Good.
The water here already.
Okay. I have mine too. My sparkling water.
See that?
All right. So I guess I'll introduce us to start if that's helpful for Denise. So my name is Jamie-Lyn, also known as Jamie Richartz. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I am a doctoral student and I am an adoptee. And I'm going to be talking to my mom and my best friend and an educator, Denise Richartz. Did you want to say anything, Mom, since I did your intro?
No, that was a very nice intro. Thank you, Beth.
So first question is just what prompted you to want to adopt?
Well, we were unable to have children. We tried. We were married very young. You know that. I was 19 and Dad was 24. And that's what we wanted before we even got married. We wanted kids right away. So we started trying right away. And within a year, we knew there was an issue. And so we went the whole medical route. And when that didn't work out at the end, we said, well, it doesn't matter. We want children one way or the other. And that's what prompted it. We said, yep, going for it. So.
And not to age you for everybody listening, but I think it's important for people to know that this was happening you and Dad were married in 1979. So this was happening in 1980,
right.
Which was a time that I know for me, a lot of my friends now that are trying, a year is nothing to try at this point.
Right.
And with the medical, with IVF and IUI, it's so much easier medically to do those things. And so I guess, how did you decide, even with the medical route, that it was time to stop the medical route and it was time to try adoption?
Well, we knew by that point that the problem was on my end, and I had a pretty big surgery to try to fix that. And that after another, I'm going to say probably a year, this was all 40 years ago. So, but within
40, was that 40? It was 40.
Well,
You're
yeah.
Right. You're right.
We married 42 years.
Yeah.
So at the end of all the medical stuff, we knew we had a choice. We could either do IVF or we could adopt. And IVF at that time, or talking 40 years ago, was not what it is now. Mm-hmm. And it was going to cost X amount of dollars to do either one. So we could either do IVF and maybe it would work. Most likely it wouldn't. And it was a one-shot deal. And that wasn't acceptable for us. We had to come out of it with a child. So we said adoption was a sure thing. We figured one way or another, we would be able to adopt that way. So that's what we did.
Do you remember how many years it was after being married that you decided and that you were going through the medical process that you decided to make that decision?
So I want to say it was a year that we couldn't conceive. And then it was probably a year of medical stuff. And then at the end of that, we were like, okay, well, we're not stopping. We're whatever it takes, whatever. So I would say 2 years. Well, we waited. Yeah, I'd say 2 years.
I bring that up because I'm sure it'll come up later, but it took almost 10 and a half years for you to have kids. And that's 11, right? Yeah. Right. I mean, that's a huge journey. And so just interesting now, I think, for people wouldn't put up with that so much nowadays.
Right. Well, what happened was as soon as we signed up with an agency, they said, oh, well, because we were still young. Don't forget, I was 21 and they were saying, oh, you just married. You want to have kids too readily. You need some time to think about this. It's too important to you. So they made me go. They wouldn't even sign me up with the agency. They made me go to therapy for, I don't even remember how long it was, to make me realize that was not the end all for me, was to have kids, that you could have a life without it. So I was not happy, but I did it anyway because I had to. And then we signed up with the agency. So the whole process was 11 years. It took us 11 years.
Don't you think it's funny that they made you do that, but you don't have to do therapy when you're pregnant?
Exactly. You're absolutely right, because the average person that is struggling so hard above and beyond just getting pregnant, it's a very long and it's an expensive and emotional journey to not have to, have some type of therapy. Yes, I do agree,
Yeah.
Or just popping them out. And,
yeah. You don't have to do that, but
yeah.
interesting what the difference is, I think, for people that are adopting and adoptees go through compared to non-adopted individuals.
And believe me, you look at everybody in the store going, damn, she's got 6 kids there. She's not even taking care of them. And you get very resentful, and you can sometimes understand why people do not the smartest things when they're going through that, because it's a very emotional time. It's, every month it's like, not going to happen. And you're getting letters, and it's a long, scary journey. And like I said, we were young, so we're like, only big people adopt. What are we doing? We don't even know what we're doing here.
Right.
Yeah. So
did you or dad know anybody who was adopted or who had adopted kids before then, like when you were growing up?
I really don't think so, because like I said, we were very young. Like nobody we knew was married yet. We were, put it this way, my wedding shower was the first shower I ever went to. So we were just young, and a lot of our friends were not even married yet. So nobody was really going through that issue at the time that we were. So if to think back, no, I can't think of anybody that we knew. But we didn't care. We wanted a kid. It didn't matter what we did. We wanted children, and we were going to make that work. So just went headlong into the scary.
And of course, Brody's barking.
I can hear
that was going to happen. I know. I tried to mute it for a second.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, there we go. He just stopped. What did everybody say in the family when you said when you and dad told them you were gonna adopt? What was that like?
Oh, everybody was devastated for us the whole path. So when we got to that end, it was just the natural step for everybody else. It wasn't like, what do you mean you're thinking of adopting? We don't know anything about it. It was just the next natural step. Everybody knew Tommy and Denise always wanted kids, and if it wasn't going to be one way, it was going to be another. So everybody was very receptive to it. My dad, Papa, who unfortunately you never met, I only learned afterwards, was afraid. He was like, he was afraid that he wasn't going to be able to love this child as much. And of course, Jamie has an older brother, Bobby, who's also adopted. And so, when Bobby came along, it was crazy. Papa just loved him. He was Papa's boy. He called him Irk McGurk, and they were best friends. There was not one bit of a difference. And I think it was a big relief for him to feel, for my dad to feel that he was just scared, I think, he was scared. He was scared for us. So, but they were best friends, As far as everybody else, we had no negative feedback from anybody ever. There was no negative feedback. We were met at the airport. We had a couple of ones that fell through before. We had a lot of support from everybody. It was very hard times for us. And, but everybody was there to support us. They were there at the airport with banners and flyers when we came home. And it was just so exciting. Everybody was excited for us, and everybody accepted them. Never questioned ever. So
I think it's interesting too, because we were the first people to be adopted in our family that I can think of. I don't know about if you can think of anybody on either side. I don't think so.
Maybe on Daddy's side of the family, I think there may have been a foreign adoption at one point. Just something in the back of my head saying maybe that, but nothing that we were privy to or that was any part of our decision making, or no. It was just, like I said, it was just the next natural, okay, all the medical stuff's done. Next, what are you going to do now? And that was just, everyone was like, okay, next.
When you were younger, we talked about this a lot, like you always wanted to be a mom, and dad too, always wanted to be a dad. But did you ever think that, did that ever cross your mind about adopting?
Probably not, because, nobody wants to think that that's not going to work out for them, physically. And so I just knew I always wanted kids, and we were pretty shocked, especially because, like I said, we were young and we wanted children right away. And we were like, what? How can this possibly be that it can be that we can't have children? So it was never a thought of it not being possible until it became impossible. So no, never
Right.
something I would have thought about.
I think it's funny because I think there's like some people, at least that I know and that we know, that they just like know they want to adopt. Like
Right.
they always know that they want to adopt a child. And so it's just interesting. I don't know if I asked that because I don't know if that was common back then. I think like at a certain point, adoption was like kind of like secretive.
Hey, I want to share with you something that has changed my life. It's more like someone, my therapist. Why is she so important? Well, because I want to win in this life. I want to break through the carousel of stories I've compiled that hold me back, that keep me from expanding into my full potentiality. Stories of unworthiness, not enoughness, and even stories of questioning why I am here. I also want to stop dumping my unsorted feelings on the people around me and reacting with the same behavioral patterns that keep me stuck. Conversations with my therapist have made me more confident, clearer in my intention, and more centered in my spirit. That is why I am elated that we are sponsored by BetterHelp, where you can, from wherever you happen to be right now, match with a therapist tailored to your exact needs. With BetterHelp, you can tap into a network of over 30,000 licensed and experienced therapists who can help you with a wide range of issues. Someone who you can text at any time and schedule online for either a chat, Zoom, or phone call. And if it turns out that your therapist isn't the right fit, you can switch to a new therapist at no additional cost. Visit the link in the show notes, betterhelp.com, when they were young, to get 10% off the first month. You need to click the link in the show notes in order to get the 10% discount. I want to see you win, beloved. Let's do it together. Visit the link, betterhelp.com, when they were young.
Yeah, I think, some people adopt because they feel that that's something they want to do in life. They want to give, our wanting to adopt was probably selfish. We wanted children and it didn't matter what it took. So it wasn't a calling or any of that. It was just whatever we needed to do to get children. And I don't think, it does, 40 years ago sounds like a really long time to me, but I don't feel that there was like a stigma with it at the time. Maybe it was just because I didn't care, or the supporting team I had around me, I had no issues with it, but I never felt like, ooh, whoa, you're a child. In fact, if anything, to this day, it's people like to hear the story. They'll be like, what? I'm sure you find it yourself. When people find out, they're like, what? Oh, well, how did it happen? And, because both of you and Bobby were different scenarios of, how we got you. So everybody likes to hear those stories. And I think it was the same way at the time too. I don't ever remember I can't think of a time ever that I had a bad vibe from anybody about adoption. It was always positive. I always thought it was positive.
That's great. Any other things about what prompted you to adopt that we missed, or should we move to the next one?
Yeah, no, I think it was we were having kids one way or the other. There's nothing much more to it. There's no big mystery behind it. We're doing it. Let's just figure out how we have to do it. Whatever we have to do. So nothing else behind it. Nope.
I think that's the funny thing about us too sometimes, because people always expect it to be like, God told us, or we just wanted to save a life. And it's like, no, we just wanted kids. And it's just like, my parents wanted kids. They couldn't have any. That was the option outside of kidnapping,
Believe me, those kids in the mall look pretty good sometimes. You better get that kid up to your leg, lady, because that's pretty. Yeah, no, it wasn't, like I said, it was more selfish because that's what we wanted. We wanted kids, period. So there was nothing, yeah.
So what was the process like for you? I know we talked a little bit and you mentioned like I have an older brother, Bobby, who's an adoptee also, and two totally different adoption processes, styles, experiences. I don't know how much you want to get into, but just what was it like for you?
I could just overview the difference between both of you.
Right.
When we first signed up, and I told you they said I needed to go to therapy. Then we finally signed up with an agency. We were living in New York at the time. We signed up with an agency, and that was actually what took the 11 years. That was where you came in. But in the meantime, we were saying, wow, this is taking an awful long time. So a friend, you know what? Now that I'm thinking that, a friend of ours was in the middle of adopting a friend of Aunt Lorraine's. And she had said, try to do it private. She gave us an attorney's number, and that's what we did. So we got in touch with an attorney. So in the meantime, while we were still on the waiting list, we adopted Bobby on a private adoption through an attorney.
Right.
After 11 years. We were still just stayed on the waiting list. And then 19 months later, we got a call from the agency and they had you. So, but it was a totally different, what you did for a private adoption was you put a separate phone line in your house and you advertised in newspapers all over the United States or all over wherever you want, you were advertising, and people would call you, in the middle of the night. Oh, my van broke down, lady. I'll give you my kid if you'll pay to have my van fixed. You got terrible calls. I'd get calls from prisoners in the middle of the night. Oh, what's the matter? Your husband is not up to the job. It was really brutal.
Wow.
When that phone rang, the world stopped because you knew it was not you had your regular home phone,
right?
And so eventually, that it did work out that way, but it's a scary thing because when you finally do get in touch with someone, well, I'm 2 months pregnant, and I need some clothes, and hey, there's other phone calls that they can be making. So you're trying to give them what you can, but your attorney's saying don't. It was a very trying process. Yours, on the other hand, was
surprise.
Actually, your brother, who was 19 months old at the time, answered the phone because I went to take out the garbage, and he picked up the phone. La, 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 and it was the agency, and they said, we have a little girl here for you. And
was it the separate line or was it the home phone?
This was the home phone because the private adoption was done. Yes, and we just stayed on the waiting list from our original sign up 11 years ago.
What made you not do the private adoption again?
$25,000,
which is like nothing now compared to IVF and IUI.
Right. And at that time, IVF was not covered by insurance at all. I know some egg retrieval now is covered. They'll cover parts of it, or they have a program where you pay a certain amount of money and they keep trying it until you get. But then it was a one-shot deal. You try it, doesn't work, adios. So, why'd you ask that question?
I was just wondering if you were keeping the private adoption process still open because, you wanted two kids. You wanted to have, the ideal was like a boy and a girl. And it was, just luck of the draw that's what you got. And
it was just luck of that. In fact, Daddy at work he came home and he said, I was talking to someone at work and we were saying, Bobby was 19 months old. We're getting ready. And boom, the phone rang. And it was on Grandma's birthday. Mm-hmm. And, my dad, Papa had already passed, and he always gave something special to Grandma on her birthday. And what we got was a call. We got a call from heaven from the adoption agency, and they had a little girl. And we said, we're not ready. We don't, you needed a separate room for each child. And we said, we don't have a separate bedroom. And she said, Denise, come and take her because the state's going to take her and she'll go into foster care for 18 months. So we were like, okay, if you can do the paperwork, we're on our way.
And I think it's important to say that Grammy pushed you for that, right? You were nervous, and she was like, just go. We'll figure it out after.
Right. Well, that's what we were, just didn't know what to, and we didn't know the system at the time. And still a little bit of a crazy system how it worked, but you just happened to be at the right place at the right time. The birth mom happened to make the right call at the right time, and it was just a matter of timing. She said, just come and get her. We'll figure out everything else afterwards. So, and I remember it was $3,000, which was nothing compared to the $25,000, but we didn't have $3,000, and we had to buy a house before either of the adoptions. We spent $25,000 on the adoption. They sent us a bill for $3,000, and we sent them $1,000, and we never heard from them again.
Uh-oh.
I was talking to somebody, and I said, well, she's 29 years old. I haven't heard from them yet, so I'm pretty sure they accepted the $1,000. So.
That's pretty funny because, that's like a huge difference between the two.
See, well, the 25,000 was advertising, putting in the phone, paying for the delivery because there was no insurance, paying for the delivery, paying for a midwife, all the stuff that came, all the prenatal stuff that came, all the doctor's appointments, because there's no insurance on that end, paying their attorney's fees and your attorney's fees. Right. So there was just a lot of, whereas with the agency, they said, well, here you go, $3,000, please.
You've always liked items on clearance. Maybe that's where I get my clearance items from. I came on sale.
That's why that's why you're a clearance shopper too.
I came on sale.
We'll take the sale one, please.
Right. I think it's interesting too for people, because with mine, like my understanding is that we had to do that, you and Dad had to do that diligent search for, if I had any parents, biological parents, I should say, out there, and like that scary process of waiting for a phone call that could come any day.
Right. Well, that was more or less done by the agency. It was different with the private adoption. You had to advertise in the paper that this child was born. Mm-hmm. I'm not exactly sure how it ran. I'm not sure if it was the birth mother or it was put in the newspaper for a certain amount of time. And if nobody responded to it, then that step was cleared. Then there was a 45-day waiting period in New York at the time, right, where you had 45 days for them to change their minds. It was a little bit different. I don't remember doing any of that with you. I know there was a waiting period. Actually,
well, my adoption wasn't finalized till 1993, I think, because we have the photo from it.
Right.
And I was born in 91. So.
Right. Like we couldn't have you baptized or anything. You wore a toddler dress at your baptism. You were 9 months old. You were pretty big. It wasn't a toddler dress. It was a little smaller than a toddler dress.
I was going to say, I didn't have any hair really, but.
Right. Yes, you didn't have any hair. But yeah, it was a long wait for everything. But we didn't feel like as we were involved in it, because like the agency, the big people were saying, like I said, we were young, we were kids. We were like, ooh, okay. They said, it's okay. Right. Whereas with the private, you felt more involved in it, and a little scarier that you were a little bit more responsible for taking care of things that, mm-hmm. I don't know. It felt different. And you were our second. And so, we knew we had made it through with the first one. So it was a little less scary, although it was a lot more sudden. Say that.
I was thinking like yesterday about it, about that a little bit. And I was thinking like Bobby was almost like the planned pregnancy, and I was like the unplanned pregnancy.
Right. And as planned as he was, like I said, it was 11 years. I will never forget. We were sitting in the living room, and I was doing a friend's taxes when the phone rang for Bobby, because he was born 3 weeks early, and the phone call was, she's in labor. And we were like, whoa! We were like running around and trying to get paperwork together. It was Easter weekend, so everything was delayed. So he he was more planned, but he was a surprise as well, where you were one heck of a surprise. Not only did Bobby answer the phone, but he had a black eye from something at the time. And I'm like, oh my gosh, now we're going to go into the adoption agency with this kid who answered the phone at 19 months and a black eye. They're never going to give her to us. But luckily for us, they did.
And on clear and on sale.
And what?
And on sale.
And on sale.
And on sale.
And looking around with her head up at 9 days old, looking around, and she never stopped. Always that would be nosy.
If like someone asked you now, 30 years later, which way they should do it, what do you think you would tell them? Like private or public? Or both?
I know now they do, like, a private adoption is basically run the same way, but it goes through an attorney. You don't put in a phone, you don't deal, you make up paperwork about yourself and you give it to an attorney, and then the people come in, the prospective parents come in, and they look, I mean, the moms, they'll come in, they'll look through a book and they pick you, and it's different than that now. So I can't really speak from that part. Taking phone calls from people was very difficult, especially when you were a kid yourself and you were scared and you didn't know what to say to these people and you were desperate, and you would say, okay, what do you want? Your van broke down? Okay, how much money? You were doing stupid things. I mean, we did a few stupid things that the attorney said, I'm telling you, do not do anything unless you speak to me. I don't care what these people tell you. So that was difficult. I don't know how it is now, but I tell you, the wait for the agency was 11 years. So I don't know what the waits are now. We looked into international adoptions at the time. Mm-hmm. They were not doing international adoptions. I don't remember why. I know China, we had looked into China, and for some reason, I don't know what was going on in the world then, but that was not an option for us. We looked into interracial babies, and we were told that one of the adoptive parents had to be the same race as the child,
right?
To keep their heritage going, and that was that. I understand it's not that way anymore. So right. I don't know how either process works nowadays, but at that time, I would say it stunk waiting 11 years, but it was a lot easier. And then luckily we had something in between. So it wasn't, you know what I mean? We had, right. You know what I'm trying to say? It was both of them were difficult, and I don't know what the process is now. So I really can't speak to that.
Right. No, and I think part of it too, when you talked about failed adoptions, like we've talked before about where you tried to adopt people with like medical needs too, babies with medical needs, and those things fell through also because they didn't feel like you were equipped, or they didn't, they changed their minds or things like that, which is difficult too.
One scary thing about, and I really doesn't make a difference through an agency or private, is we were dealing with one girl at a time, and she just suddenly told us that her family had a history of Huntington's disease, and we didn't know what it was, and she said, I just wanted to let you know because I think it was only fair for you to know. And we researched it, and it was not something nice, and it was an ailment that affected your child like when they were 30.
Right. So
you would spend your entire life, and then this child would be suffering. And we chose not to. We were not very involved with her at that point. She let us know pretty much in the beginning, and we said that was something that we were not comfortable with. Mm-hmm. But she just happened to tell us because she was a kind person. You don't know, and you really don't kind of know. Probably more through an agency, a little bit more, because they can track the medical history more of the birth parents, but you still don't know. Right. A lot of times the father's not available, or the records aren't, or even in your case, when she first found out she was pregnant, she signed up with the agency, and they never heard from her again. And then 9 months later, when she delivered, she stopped like a janitor in the hallway and said, can you call this agency? And he was like, oh, okay. And he called, and she called me. She was like, Denise, boom, boom, boom. Let's do this. But
Yeah,
normally it doesn't.
she the person from the agency, just to
My
clarify.
social worker, we had a social worker that you would come out, I think every 3 months for a long time. We had a social worker. So she was the one that called and said, you gotta do, this is it. We gotta do it. She's leaving the hospital. We have to do it now. So again, we didn't have a lot of history,
Right.
so you just say, well, it could be your own child that there was a disability with. But I think with the Huntington's disease, it was scary for us because, I don't know, raising a child, and I've always worked with kids with disabilities and I don't have an issue with it. But I think for something for a child with the onset of it is in their 30s, didn't think it was, I don't know.
Well, I think it's scary too to be a first-time parent going through like a scary process of adoption and to deal with that too and not know what you're doing to begin with, let alone what you're going to know in 30 years and what life's going to be like in 30 years.
Right. It seemed too scary. And I appreciated the fact that she gave us that option because you just don't know.
Right.
You don't know when you carry a child on your own either, but when somebody's telling you straight out, there's going to probably be an issue, you tend to think a little bit more,
Yeah. Being with the agency for 11 years, did they do like a home study every year to keep you active, or they just like popped up 11 years later, like, hey, we have a little girl, come to New York City and pick her up?
I'm trying to think because, I know we had 2 home studies. I'm not sure why we had the second one. It may have been like an after home study because it was like, boom, with you. I mean, we got the call 9 days, you were 9 days old, we brought you home. So I think we had like a follow-up one after,
right?
Which was, I remember thinking at the time, it was so strange because you're thinking, oh my gosh, everything in the house has to be spotless and blah, blah, blah. And they literally, never left the living room. And when they left, I said, Daddy, we could have dead bodies in the basement here. They never even checked. It was a little like, woo. But, they write beautiful things, very warm, comfortable home, loving couple, blah, blah, blah. And we did have 2. I'm not sure. And it probably was, they had to do a second one after because everything was kind of like, so I think there were definitely 2. I'm not sure why. But
did they do any with the private attorney, or they just took your word for it because you were paying $25,000?
I think, Jamie, I don't remember.
That's okay. I'm trying to make you think of things from 40 years ago, so that's okay. Mom, don't worry.
I'm not sure what happened for breakfast, so I don't remember why. The agency. I mean, the private adoption. Really, a private adoption is it's just an attorney.
Right.
He's just there to, and like I said, now he does the connection. Then they didn't. You'd call him and you'd say, oh, I just got a call. And he'd say, all right, sounds good. Let me know anything further. Don't send them any money, stuff like that. He was just the one trying to keep you in line. So, but I mean, I think legally, I'm sure legally, but maybe because we already had a home study, I don't really remember.
I think now with private adoptions, they have a social worker and an attorney, and the social worker does like the home study and the connections between the two. And then the attorney just does the documentation. I know 2 people that have done private, and it's been like that.
But I'm trying to think now because she used to come, and I remember her name, Netta Riot. She used to come like every 3 months, and that was when we had Bobby. So I'm not sure why. I'm not sure how they got involved in it to monitor us. And I'm not sure.
That's okay. You don't have to remember from 31 years ago since he's 30.
Yeah, in your case.
Yeah,
I'm just trying to think. There was just so much going on, and it was, it was rough. But it was worth it. Look what I got, my girl and my son.
How do you think your life changed going from one child, new mom after 10 years, 10 and a half years, to being a two-parent family, or to not two-parent, two-child family?
Two-child family. Well, I can tell you exactly because, obviously we wanted for so long. And then Bobby came along and, it was the world to us and to everybody. And I had him and I was watching Aunt Lorraine's kids at the same time. And a friend of Aunt Lorraine had a baby about the same age, a couple of months older than you. And I was babysitting for her. Right. And all of a sudden you came and I was like, "Oh, sorry, I can't babysit for your kid anymore." And you came, it was such a change of wanting so long for this. And then he came along and then it was like, "Oh my gosh, now we got two. What do we do?" It was scary. And I was watching her. I was like, "Well, get this one out of here because I like the new one better."
Yeah. I think it's funny too, because one of the big stories always like around my adoption and how I think when I described like how quick it was to people and like surprising was when you guys brought me to Aunt Lorraine's when I first came home. And Danny and Nicole, those are my cousins, that we're close to. They didn't know who I was, and it was supposed to be a surprise, and they were like, 7 and 8, I think, or 8 and 9, and they were scared. I mean, you tell it better than I do, but
they were scared. Well, first off, they thought you were the other little girl that I was watching. And then when I remember Danny backed up into the corner and she was scared. They knew nothing about it and we didn't say anything. They would, even when we went to get you, we said nothing to anybody. I mean, we were so frightened with you because you were born in Manhattan Hospital. We lived on the island at the time. And it was November and it was freezing and it was snowing and it was miserable. And we didn't buy a bottle for anything because we were so afraid we were going to jinx it. So I remember picking you up in the hospital and we stopped in Manhattan in a food store. Daddy pulled to the side of the road and he went into the food store and we could bought bottles and formula and diapers and stuff because so nobody knew. And it was a big surprise to Danny and Nicole. And when we showed up with you, they were not comfortable. They were like scared. I'm not sure what they were scared of. But
I was kind of odd looking, so I could see that. I wasn't the cutest newborn, so.
You're adorable. I don't even think they saw your face. They weren't sure. We had some issues before with children, with them not working out. And I think they were scared. And we felt afterwards, perhaps we should have prepared them a little bit better, but they survived.
Who did you tell besides Grammy at the time that you guys were going to get me?
Going to get you? Aunt Lorraine, Danny Nicole's mother and father. I'm trying to think. Probably most of the adults in the family knew. I don't think we kept it from. We just wanted to keep it from the kids because we had a previous one that fell through, and it was hard on the girls at that time. And we just said, we didn't want to do that again. We didn't want to have to put them through that again because we all kind of lived through a failed one, and we were adults. It was hard enough for us. Shouldn't have a 7 and 8 year olds. So when they saw you, they were like, "Well, I don't know. Last time it didn't, and blah blah blah." So
with the previous one, had they met the previous one too?
No, but it was, and I don't even. My memory's terrible. I don't even know if I told you about it, but before Bobby, we had one before Bobby, and we had flown there, and we were stuck there he had an issue when he was born, and he was hospitalized for a little bit, and we were staying in a hotel, and we were going to feed him during the day during his feedings, and we didn't know that his birth mom was doing the same thing and her family. And so we were in Virginia, and everybody at home was waiting. They kept calling us, "What's going on? What's going on?" And came to the day to go home, and we had the car seat, we had everything ready, And
Your connection went out a little bit.
she called us at we were in a hotel, and she called us and said, connection is unstable. Can you hear me?
I can hear you now. It went unstable for a second.
Okay.
Just start where she called you at the hotel. She, the attorney?
The birth mom.
The birth mom.
Correct. Who was also taking care of him at the hospital. We didn't know. And she called us the day that we were supposed to be leaving. And she said, I need to take him, and I need to make my amends with him. I need to spend time with him. Well, there was nothing we could say. Okay. Right. And I said, do you have a car seat? And she said, no. And I said, well, at least come and get our car seat. And she took them, and they were gone all day. And we waited in the hospital all day with everyone calling us and saying, what's going on? What's going on? And we had named him and everything. I mean, it was brutal. And then she called and said, well, my father wants to go out to dinner with us, and blah, 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 blah. And we're like, okay, there was nothing we could do. It wasn't our child,
right.
And then she called and said she was coming back. And we said, okay. And I'm sitting in the hotel window, watched her father pull up with the car seat, came to the hotel door, opened the door, and the car seat was empty. And we said, we just can't do it. So this was talking about Gianni and Nicole. Everybody was calling us, what's going on? When you come home? We're like, oh, no, we're just waiting. It's horrible. And so the kids lived through that.
Right.
As children, as far as it was for us, they were kids. So that when we came with you, they were like, someone can take them back, or, so that was what was scary for them.
Thanks for sharing that, Mom. I don't think we've ever talked about that before.
I don't think we ever did either. It was, you felt as an adoptive parent that you tell your child, we picked you special, like we lined them all up, and all of our choices, and we picked you out special because we loved you the most, and that's what you want your child to feel. But unfortunately, with the way the system works, that's not the way it goes. So we didn't want to feel like, oh well, that one fell through. Well, you were our second choice. This was for Bobby,
right?
So I probably just never did share that story, and we just suffered that on our own, so yeah. But that's why everyone and with Bobby's birth mother, she wanted me to be there for the delivery, and I said, I'm not doing it again. I'm not going and falling for a kid. I mean, we had his pictures taken professionally at the hospital. They came to our house a month later after it had already fallen through. So it was rough. So it was rough for everybody. People we were devastated. But then within, it was like a year later that Bobby was born. So we got a call again that she was 2 months pregnant. And I said, I'm not doing this again. But it just went along, and it went along, and it went along, and here he is.
31 years later, 31 years and a few weeks of change.
31 years later.
So, do you still have the pictures that were professionally taken?
I do not.
Did you keep them?
I do not, but I will say this, just recently cleaning out the attic, Grandma Richartz had them, which I was very surprised.
That's surprising.
I was very surprised that she kept them, because by the time that I sent them, it was over already. By the time, you didn't have a camera, you had a camera that you developed the film. So by the time we got home, developed the film, and mailed it down to Florida, it had already fallen through. So I was surprised to find that she still had the pictures. It was actually shocking. This was like 3 weeks ago we found them.
Right. Mm-hmm. That's wow. I think of all people, like in our family, Grandma Richartz, which is my dad's mom, was so like nonchalant about the whole adoption and process, almost like, when we were teenagers and she lived with us for a little bit, that's when she like just brought up stuff at the kitchen table about things that like we were all like, well, we haven't talked about that as a family. So thanks for just opening up that door abruptly and ripping that Band-Aid off.
Right. Which makes me think that I'm surprised that wasn't mentioned at the
right. Yeah. Right. That's why I said that. I'm surprised she just wasn't like, oh yeah, what about that kid in the photos? Because she was very much like that our whole life.
Very much like that about everything. Everything was right. What's going on? Well, there was a boat accident. They're at the bottom of oh boy, what were they doing? She was a very calm person where we were not. So
right.
Right. You're nonchalant about things. Things come out,
Yeah, of course. And that's not to say like, I mean, we've known about our adoption our whole lives, Bobby and I, that was something that was really serious for you guys. And, I can remember, a lot of my very early memories, like 3-4 years old, having those conversations around the dinner table about like what adoption meant and, what did that look like? And, our family, extended family talking about it. And we had I don't know I think you still have it at your house, but that little paper, I think somebody gave it to you as like a baby shower gift. And it was like a manila paper. And it had like a poem about adoption. Like, you were not born from my body, you were born from my heart, blah, blah, blah. So that was important. Like that hung in our room as toddlers, before we
there was never, ever shame in it or a discomfort in it. I mean, we were told, and I'm not sure who we were told by that at that time. I remember them saying the words, when you're changing their diapers, just tell them, oh, mommy and daddy are so happy that we adopted you. We're so happy that you're part of our life. So that it is never a word that is not said to them, or it is never a word that is said to them suddenly when you think they're old enough to comprehend it. Because they may never be old enough to comprehend it, and you're making it a big word. So for us, and because it was never an issue with any our friends, family, or anybody, it was never a problem. And like pretty much the people think it's pretty cool. I'm actually nowadays, there's a series that I was watching, and also in a book that I was just reading, and I felt so bad about the way they put such a poor light on it that it would make me feel sorry. Not like for you. Mm-hmm. I'll watch a show and I'll say, boy, I hope she doesn't watch this show, or I hope she doesn't read this book, because nowadays the people still have things to say about it. And I just think that's awful. I can't understand, because no matter what your reasoning is, if you just want children so badly, as we did, or if it's a calling for you to have children, why would you make somebody feel bad about that, or that child?
What would you, I mean, you're a parent of a 31-year-old and an almost 30-year-old, and you're 20, thank you, Mom, 29, and you're living through like having to have those conversations with us still of like the things that you see. But what would you tell a person having a child now, like how to deal with those or how to have those conversations? I mean, our conversations change as we've gotten older. They've changed, and like what you've told us, not that they've been secrets, but maybe things have changed or, been a little bit different. But
I mean, some things I just think that at some point there's not a matter of hiding it, but that it's not a reason to at that time. A 4-year-old, a 5-year-old does not need to know all the mechanics of what happens. All they have to know is that they're loved, and they don't have to know that it was a long, drawn-out process. Like I said before, all I want you to know is that mommy picked you special, because I want you to know that you're special. Oh, unfortunately, that's not the way it works. It's not a go and I'll take the cute blonde over there.
Yeah, like the Cabbage Patch Kids, where you pick the Cabbage Patch.
It's difficult. It's heartbreaking. In some cases, it's expensive. It's long term, and it's not an easy process. So, but a kid doesn't need to know that. I mean, as an adult, I mean, now I'm probably saying things to you that you didn't know. I don't think you knew about that one before. And, my memory, I don't remember if I told you even something really important like that. You and I discussed something the other day too, that I'm like, please help me remember, I don't have a good memory to begin with. And it was a long time ago. But so I think if I had to give advice, I think the information to a child needs to be delivered at age appropriate. If, we love you to death. You're everything we ever wanted in the whole world. You're the most beautiful, the most sweet. We adore you. You're everything we ever wanted. And then maybe that little bit of information as you're growing up. And I think that's kind of what happened with you, getting a little more information, and it's not hiding it. It's just, it's not necessary. I don't think it's necessary for a child to know that.
Right.
And when it is necessary, like when you have to do an interview on a podcast with your child, some stuff comes out. But advice, it's I like I said, I don't know what the struggle is, what the process is so much now, time frame wise, and what it takes to adopt, but just keep pushing through, because if that's what you want, you just have to keep pushing through, no matter what they tell you, no matter what you have to do before, if you have to talk to a therapist or whatever they want you to do, whatever you can do financially, friends, family, whatever you have to do. It's not something I would go into if you were unsure about it.
Right.
Not that to me, it never made a difference either way. But to some people, if they're even questioning, I think that it may make a difference to them. And I know that's usually the men. They're like, if it's not mine, I don't want to have anything to do with it. So I think your marriage has to be strong, because it's a strong struggle. And I think you have to definitely be okay with that decision. And then just don't hide it, and don't let them watch This Is Us.
Not that we don't love that show, but
I love that show. But they had that one bad episode, and I always felt like writing to the director and saying, "Why would you put such a poor light on adoption? Just in this day and age, it really upset me."
I think it's funny because the one other book that I can just distinctly remember that you never wanted me to read was like My Face on the Milk Carton. Right. And I remember always thinking like mom's going to think I'm going to think that I'm a milk carton kid. And that's why I can't read this book. Like, I remember reading it and you seeing it and like taking it out of my hand. Like, no, we're not going to open this door. I was probably like 8, 9 years old. Right. And you were like, this is not a good book for an adoptee. Right.
Exactly. It's it's just probably a bad one to talk about, because to me it never made a difference. But then again, I'm not the child, so as you're getting older, I'm starting to see that, oh well, maybe it wasn't only about how I accepted it. Like I worry about, and I know your brother. He's like, he goes to the doctors and they ask him about his health. What medical conditions his parents have, and he's like, oh, blah blah blah. But he doesn't even like remember that it makes a difference,
Right.
So for him, but sometimes I look at you and I'm like, well, why would they say something so hurtful to somebody that's so kind and shouldn't hurt? Because I don't have a problem with it, but maybe it's not my problem. But I just like to think that you had a good raising, and
I think that's true too. And we talked about that recently,
real recently.
Yeah. Like recently coming up on this about like your thoughts on why I haven't looked for, I don't even like the term biological family, but I guess for purposes of people that don't know, like biological family.
It's better than saying your birth mom, because that was something that made my hair stand when I don't want anybody using the word mom. When they were talking about, seriously, when they were talking about you.
Yeah. And I think for me, I feel the same way. Like, it's hard. I had a conversation recently with a friend who placed a child for adoption, but now has kids of her own. And it came up with them like that I was adopted in a conversation in front of their son. And she was trying to explain it the best way she could. And she said, like, she she wasn't raised with her real parents. And I almost like threw up, I was like, wait, let's not start this narrative, but I got off we had that conversation recently, like, what was that, like last week, about, that you thought that I didn't want to look because of you. And it was just, I think, a big time that it was just a difference of opinion, because that's not how I feel at all. But I can convince you of how I feel, even though you know very well when I'm lying.
Well, I also know that you're a nosy thing, and I know you're a good stalker. And I'm like, there's no way that this girl does not want to know. But out of respect for me, because you're a very kind soul and you would want to hurt me, I have always felt that, well, when I'm gone, she's going to be running around looking to find out. And you said not. You said that you had your reasons why that was. You've seen a lot of scenarios that didn't work out for people that made that choice to search. And
I think for me, and maybe it's because of like what you said before, that everybody's been so accepting in our family about it.
Right.
So why, if I'm full, why do I don't need to be more full.
Right.
Like, I'm full and content. I don't need to be more full. I don't need anything.
You're still nosy though.
I am nosy, but sometimes it's better not to know.
Well, that's true. And you're smart enough probably to know the difference too. We can be nosy about these people, but I'm not going to be nosy about me.
Right.
And that would be, which was also something that we said, that would be, we're certainly not afraid that at this point in your life, you're going to get up and leave with this lady and say, well, she's cooler than you or cuter than you. Would that be a fear of mine? Just jealous. I would just be jealous. It wouldn't be a matter of thought you'd leave or love me any less or become her best friend. But it would just be like, no, she's mine. Leave her alone. Just a selfish thing again. It would be me just not saying, I don't want there to be somebody else special. So
I don't think that's possible.
Well, I appreciate that. And I feel the same way. So,
well, what do you think? And if it's, you don't have to answer if it's too hard, because I know we're trying to not get too emotional today, because we're not good with that. We can get emotional pretty quick, either funny or emotional. Those are our two emotions.
Right. We have bad emotions for being funny.
Right. But I think, we talked about advice, and I just think for other parents who might be thinking about adoption or early in the process, recently adopted, what were some of your biggest fears as a parent of adoptees from 1 to 31? Yes, that at the beginning stages, somebody could come and say that they wanted us and it could fall through. But after that point, once it was a done deal, did you have any fears about this process, and what were they?
Am I doing right by them? Am I playing enough with them? Am I teaching them enough? Am I being kind? Am I being strict enough, or am I being too strict with them? I don't think that I personally ever, I don't really think I ever sat back and said, maybe it's just selfish again, am I doing a better job than the birth family would have done? Or, do I have anybody's standards to live up to? Or would she ever been better off with somebody else because I didn't give enough? I don't think I ever felt that. And maybe because I felt that I was being the best mom that I could be. And it didn't matter where you came from.
Right. That's what I was going to say. I don't think it was selfish. I just think you you loved us and you were our parents. So there was nobody, you wouldn't compare yourself to a different parent because there wasn't another parent.
Right. And I never, and I will say this on you guys' behalf too, I never in your entire life did either of you ever say out of anger or in any situation, well, you're not my real mom, or I would, well, my other, there was never, that was never brought up. And I don't think even a harsh word of arguments ever on my side or our side did we ever put you in the position of saying, well, sure, look, you were ours from day one. And I don't find it in my case being differentiated between you being adopted or you being born from me. It didn't matter.
I think it's funny because you said that, and like, anytime I can think about like the conversation about adoption and things like that, it always came from you and Dad. Like, it was always a conversation pretty much coming from you guys.
Right.
Not necessarily from Bobby, not at all. Like you said, I think he forgets half the time. He's like, oh yeah, like I forgot you and I don't have the same DNA. I forgot.
He's that before. Oh yeah, well I forgot, Mom. Like, okay, well that's good. I don't have a problem with you forgetting, but yeah.
I think for me, it's like, unless we have these conversations or someone brings it, like it comes up in a conversation, I don't think about it except for my birthday.
On your birthday?
Yeah, because it's like weird time,
Is that? Yeah. Well.
Yeah.
Huh. Why? Why is that?
Because it's like the only time you're like, wow, someone's probably thinking about me.
Right.
Yeah.
I do. Yeah. Aw. Yeah. And I'm sure, and I don't know the scenarios or the situations much, but yeah. And that's, like I said, a lot of it was me worrying about putting that onto you and not realizing that you have that on your own. Is something I never thought about that. I didn't. Well,
that's, I think that's a testament to you and Dad and our whole family. Like that neither one of us feel like we're missing anything.
Never made a difference to us either way, ever. To anybody that we dealt with, anybody in our family. You guys were just one of the Rat Pack. Yeah.
I think the only difference for me was a lot of people on your side talk about like how I was a gift,
Yes. Well, you were a gift because, like I said, you came, on Grandma's birthday, and
in a rough year.
In a rough year when we had just lost Grandpa, and you came out of nowhere, and I will remember you saying. And you were little because you were sitting on the toilet bowl and I was helping. And you said, Mommy, I remember when that man, when I was in heaven before I came to you, you were very religious when you were younger. And you said, I remember when I was still in heaven and that man came to me and he said that Denise needs a little girl down there. And we were floored because Papa was just new to heaven. And he was July. It was like 4 months later that you came. And for you to have said that to us as a young girl, you were always smart. You always had pretty good verbiage, even when you were little.
That's how you knew I was going to be a PhD student.
We were like, yeah, well, this one, she's on the bowl and she's talking nonsense to us. But when you said that, we were like, it was, so we all felt about it. And because it was so suddenly, and because you were a girl, and because it came out of nowhere, and because you were blonde hair, blue eyes, and it was, and you guys, the two of you growing up, little, you were both the same size, little toe heads, blue eyes. Everyone thought you were twins, and everyone would say, "Oh my gosh, they look just like you." I'm like, "Oh, thank you."
Yeah.
It was never questions, So.
I remember being in the shopping cart, and I was probably 4 because we still live in New York, and Bobby and I were like in the shopping cart, and we were at the grocery store, and some lady was like, "Oh my God, are they twins?" And we both said like in unison, "We're adopted." And the lady like didn't know what to do. She was like, "That's good," and like ran off. Like, oops, thanks.
Yeah. It's funny because I was just speaking. I was at a friend's house earlier, and I was saying that I was going to be doing a podcast tonight. And of course, all the kids nowadays know what a podcast is. The only one that didn't was me.
Right.
And they were like, "Oh, like, what are you doing on a podcast?" And I said, "It's about adoption." And I said something about you, and the little girl who was 8, she said, "What do you mean about adoption?" And I said, "Well, my daughter's going to be on that." And she said, "Is she adopted?" And I said, "Yeah." And she was like, "Oh, cool." And she just went right back to her thing. So it was such a comforting thing too,
Mm-hmm.
It's the adults that are the ones that are sometimes uncomfortable with it. But I find more people interested in knowing the story. Oh my gosh. Oh, well, when did, then it's like a story that people like to hear.
Mm-hmm.
except this is us.
You're never going to let that down.
I was so mad about that one.
I know you were, Mom. We don't have too much time, I don't think, left, but thank you for talking with me, Mom. I know public speaking is not easy for you always. So
it's going okay.
I appreciate you. It's going good. I'm good. I'm glad.
I'm not forgetting my words.
Yeah. And usually on the podcast, they ask the question about, where do you think you can apply courage in your life? Right. And I told you I wasn't going to put you on the spot by asking you that. And I was thinking a lot about it, and you, me, and Dad, we talked about like just silly things that we thought were times that you had applied courage in your life. But I was just thinking about your life, like as a whole in this whole process. You've been a person that's gone through a lot of loss. We all have as a family. And sorry, I'm getting emotional.
I was worried about you to cry.
Yeah, it's me. I promise I don't do this in therapy rooms, so I hold it together in front of clients. No, you've been through a lot of loss and a lot of early loss. We have as a family, and even through the process of, the grief of wanting to be a mother and wanting to do things naturally and having to grieve that. And the failed adoptions, the failed process. And sorry, Mom.
I'm courageous. Is that what you're saying?
No, I was going to say, you're just a person. And you said it was funny because we didn't talk about what I was going to say at all. And you said like a few minutes ago, like 10 minutes ago, you were like, you just push through it. You just got to push through it. And like, it was so funny because that's what I was thinking last night. I'm like, my mom has always taught us to just push through.
Just push through, right? We have struggled. And a lot of families have. It was difficult on Dad and I earlier, but it worked out. It worked out, and you push through. There's not much more you can do, and especially for an adoption, the end result is worth it all. No matter what you went through, no matter
But I just think that's a way that you've always shown your courage. You just push through, and you're like, hey, in 3 months, 3 years, 5 months, like how many times have you and I talked and you said, in 3 years or 5 years, we're going to look back and either we're going to cry about it or we're going to laugh about it, but it'll be 5 years from now.
Right.
And
what do you have tattooed on your wrist? This too shall pass. And my handwriting. And that's something that no matter hard, difficult something is at the time, it does pass. And you do look back, and no matter how you wake up every morning sick because of whatever is the issue going on, it does pass. It never goes away. But in the case of adoption, it does, because, you do suffer a loss of that when you're younger and you've already made the decision to adopt, and you just move forward and you just go along. And I don't know. I do know one case of an adoption that was an issue that didn't work out, but my experience with it was wonderful. I got 2 beautiful children, and I wouldn't have it any other way. So there you go.
That's how you show your courage, right? Is to push through no matter what.
I guess so.
Was that good? Was that okay? Or should I have given like a better example, like a heroic moment you did?
That was pretty good. Well, originally the courage was doing the podcast. I thought we were going to use. I thought Denise was going to let that one slide for me. She said writing.
She did, but I pushed you to it because I thought it was important to highlight that, and that's why you're one of my biggest heroes. Is that you just push through everything, even when it's hard, and even when it feels like we're not going to make it through. You keep us together and remind us of that.
Just make it through. This too shall pass. Yeah. Love you.
I love you, Mom. Okay. Anything I missed? Now that I got us both crying, I'm sorry.
We could have knocked it off before.
Denise is going to be like, thanks. I couldn't use any of it between the crying and the internet and the dog.
Laughing and the internet.
The laughing, internet, the crazy talk. This Is Us is going to sue me.
But I actually enjoyed it. I was, this took a long time for me to agree to do, only because, not because I had an issue with the topic, because I had an issue with me being able to express myself. Because, you get older, the words don't come out as easily. And I was a little bit nervous about that.
Is there anything you think Dad's public speaking is not his thing?
No.
Not that he's scared of the topic, he's just scared of the public speaking part.
Exactly.
But do you think there's anything he would have said that would be important?
I think
He would have been crying, so he wouldn't have said a lot. But
there would have been a lot of sniffing and crying going on. We felt the same way. I will say this: there were many marriages that broke up because the wife or the husband couldn't have children, and like I said earlier, the fathers were like, absolutely not, not for my growing, blah blah blah, and Daddy was supportive medically, emotionally, financially, and for our decision. There was never like, well, what do you think? Do you think and he was like, whatever it takes. We want kids, whatever it takes. So, and through the whole long, arduous process and the failures, and he was always very supportive and courageous. Push.
We'll give Dad some credit too. I'm sorry.
You got to push, like you said. Well, like you said, you got to push through. You got to just keep going, and it obviously paid off. So that's our story, and we're sticking to it.
We're sticking to it.
Yeah.
All right, Mom. Anything else?
I think that's pretty much everything that I wanted to say.
Me too. All right. Love you, Mom. Thanks for doing it.
Love you, honey.
Tell Dad I love him.
Will do. Bye.
All right. Love you. You know how to leave?
No, just
you hit the leave button on the, you can X or you can hit the leave button on the bottom right. It's a red square that says leave. Yep. Yeah. And you just say leave meeting.
Bye, sweetie.
All right. Love you.
What a beautiful conversation. Such a testament to full-bodied listening and dialogue rooted in true empathy. I usually do reflections here, but I'm going to hold off until next week when Jamie-Lyn comes back on her own to chat with me about this experience. What do you think, my friends? So good, right? Another beautiful episode. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you to my guest today. If you liked this episode, the best way to support me and this work is to write an iTunes review, a 5-star review. This helps us reach the top of searches and helps more people to find us. And if you personally want to connect, please reach out on Instagram or Facebook. And I have some great resource material on my website at laniceantoineshelley.com. So go on over there too. Until next we meet, go gently and have courage, my love.